The stars burned bright above Earth as the Akyros warships descended through the planet's atmosphere. Their hulls shimmered with energy shields, reflecting the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. To them, humanity was just another primitive race to be crushed under their boots, another world to add to their growing empire. Their commanders scoffed at Earth's outdated technology. Projectile weapons, crude explosives, and an army of soldiers with no genetic enhancements or cybernetic augmentations. This was not a war. It was a culling. The first wave of the invasion came swift and merciless. Akyros soldiers, clad in exoskeleton armor and wielding plasma rifles, stormed into human cities, expecting little resistance. Their aerial drones scouted ahead, mapping every inch of terrain, tracking every heat signature. Earth's military did what it could, but against energy-based weaponry, their bullets seemed like toys. The Akyros laughed at the feeble attempts to stop them. Tanks melted under concentrated plasma fire. Jets were swatted from the sky like insects. Humanity, they believed, was already broken. Yet, as they pressed deeper into human territory, something felt off. This was too easy. The cities fell too quickly. The resistance seemed almost staged. Commanders exchanged uneasy glances, but arrogance silenced their doubts. The humans had no choice but to surrender. The Akyros had seen it before, worlds capitulating before them, their leaders groveling for mercy. But there were no white flags here. No pleas for negotiations. Only silence. Then the first shot rang out. A single Akyros officer, standing atop a captured building, fell without warning. One moment he was barking orders, the next his head was gone, a crimson mist painting the air. His body crumpled before his soldiers could react. Panic flickered through their ranks, but their training held. They searched for the source of the attack, scanning rooftops, deploying drones. Nothing. The humans were not supposed to be capable of this level of precision. Then another shot. Another kill. Another body falling lifelessly to the ground. The officers barked orders to find the enemy, but it was useless. The snipers were ghosts. Unseen. Unheard. Each shot delivered with pinpoint accuracy, striking down commanders and disrupting the invasion's momentum. The Akyros soldiers began to feel something unfamiliar, unease. These were not mere rebels firing blindly in desperation. These were professionals, trained killers who struck without warning and left no trace. The battlefield began to change. Akyros patrols started moving more cautiously, second-guessing every step. Their advanced armor was useless against bullets that pierced visors and weak points with uncanny precision. Their shields, designed for frontal assaults, were meaningless against enemies who never revealed themselves. And still the shots kept coming. What was supposed to be a swift conquest had turned into something else entirely. The Akyros had miscalculated. They had assumed humanity would fold under superior firepower. Instead, they had awakened something far worse. A predator that did not charge headfirst into battle, but watched from the shadows, patient and lethal. And the Akyros were starting to realize they were the ones being hunted. The Akyros believed in overwhelming force. Their military doctrine was built on direct engagement, crushing resistance through sheer firepower. But force meant nothing when the enemy refused to be seen. Their soldiers marched through the streets, scanning every rooftop, every window, yet no targets revealed themselves. They deployed motion sensors, heat scanners, aerial drones. None of it mattered. The snipers were ghosts. Panic set in when another officer fell. Then another. The precision was unnatural. Each shot placed perfectly between armored plates, through visors, or straight into exposed necks. The Akyros had fought wars for centuries, yet never had they encountered an enemy that struck with such surgical efficiency. It was as if the humans had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. The battlefield became a death trap. Every alley, every shadow, every high vantage point concealed a potential killer. The Akyros stopped walking in straight lines. They huddled together, forcing their movements into tight formations, hoping their combined armor would offer some protection. It didn't. The snipers were patient, calculating. They waited for gaps, for the precise moment an enemy lowered his guard, then took the shot. The soldiers learned quickly. Standing still meant death, moving meant death, speaking meant death. They tried to return fire, spraying plasma bolts in every direction, blasting entire buildings apart. But their weapons were useless against ghosts. The humans did not fight back in open combat. They let fear do the work for them. Commanders ordered countermeasures. They flooded the battlefield with aerial surveillance, heat-tracking drones scanning the environment for any sign of the attackers. But the snipers knew this was coming. They used heat-masking cloaks, buried themselves beneath rubble, disguised their rifle barrels to blend with their surroundings. The Akyros technology, so advanced that it had conquered countless worlds, was powerless against a human with a rifle and patience. Then came the psychological warfare. The snipers didn't just kill, they dismantled morale. The Akyros found their officers dead before morning briefings. Their medics were taken out first, leaving the wounded to bleed out helplessly. Supply convoys were picked apart, one driver at a time. Even the armored walkers, their mighty war machines, fell to well-placed shots in hydraulic joints, turning them into nothing more than useless hunks of metal. The soldiers began hesitating. Some refused to leave their posts. Others ignored orders, pretending not to hear their commander's desperate calls. For the first time in Akyros history, an invasion force stalled. Not due to superior numbers, not due to overwhelming defense, but because of fear. A squadron of elite Akyros warriors was dispatched to hunt the snipers. They moved with calculated precision, tracking what little evidence they could find. Then, just as they thought they had cornered their prey, the first soldier dropped. Then the second. Then the third. By the time they realized they had been led into a trap, it was too late. The last thing they heard was the crack of another rifle. Then silence. The Akyros were no longer an invasion force. They were prey. Every step outside their fortifications was a calculated risk. Their mighty warships, once symbols of dominance, remained docked above cities they could no longer control. Their soldiers, who had once marched with arrogance, now moved like frightened animals, expecting death at any moment. The battlefield belonged to the unseen. The snipers dictated the terms of engagement, deciding who lived and who died. The Akyros commanders finally understood their mistake. They had not invaded a defenseless planet. They had walked into a world perfectly suited for this kind of warfare. Earth was not a battlefield of brute force. It was a hunting ground. And humans were the apex predators. The Akyros High Command refused to accept this reality. They doubled their efforts, deploying counter-sniper teams, flooding cities with tracking drones, ordering soldiers to clear entire sectors in coordinated sweeps. But these tactics had been used before, by other armies in other wars. And just like then, they failed. The snipers anticipated every move, countered every strategy, turned every advantage against them. Akyros patrols were systematically erased, their bodies left as grim reminders. Drones sent to locate the snipers were taken out before they could transmit data. When the invaders tried to use bait, exposed supply lines, seemingly vulnerable officers, the snipers ignored them. They could not be lured. They chose their targets with cold precision, striking where it hurt the most. The psychological toll deepened. Soldiers started refusing orders. Entire squads deserted, fleeing into the wilderness, preferring the unknown to the certainty of death. Reports of infighting spread through the ranks. Commanders executed those who disobeyed, but it made no difference. The snipers had made the Akyros afraid of their own shadows. One desperate attempt was made to turn the tide. The Akyros deployed their most elite warriors, biomechanically enhanced, their senses sharpened to superhuman levels. Their mission: eliminate the snipers at any cost. These were the best soldiers the Akyros had ever produced, veterans of 100 wars, unshaken by fear. They lasted 2 days. When their bodies were found, there was no sign of a struggle. No wasted shots, no prolonged fight. Just single-bullet wounds, placed with perfect precision. Even the best the Akyros had to offer had been nothing more than another set of targets. That was when the whispers began. Not among the humans, but within the Akyros ranks. Some claimed the humans were not natural, that they had evolved for war in ways no other species had. Others suggested darker theories, that they were something more than mortal, something designed to kill with supernatural precision. Whatever the explanation, the truth was undeniable. The Akyros were losing. Not in a glorious battle, not in an honorable fight, but in the slow, methodical way a predator dismantles its prey. For the first time in their history, the Akyros faced an enemy they could not understand. And worse, they could not stop. The Akyros war machine, once unstoppable, had ground to a halt. The invasion force that had raised countless worlds was now trapped, surrounded by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and, worst of all, couldn't fight. Their soldiers no longer looked for victory. They only looked for a way out. The breaking point came when their highest-ranking commander was found dead in his fortified command post. No alarms had sounded. No breach had been recorded. One moment he was preparing a new battle plan. The next he was slumped over his holomap, a single round through his skull. The message was clear. There was nowhere left to hide. Orders from the Akyros homeworld were simple. Hold position and crush the resistance. But the soldiers on the ground knew better. There was no resistance to crush. The humans weren't fighting a war. They were exterminating and invading force one bullet at a time. The first desertions were covered up. Then entire squads vanished into the forests, hoping to escape the nightmare they had stumbled into. Officers threatened, punished, executed those who refused to fight, but it didn't matter. Fear had burrowed too deep. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were men waiting to die. The final blow came not from the humans, but from the Akyros themselves. A transmission was intercepted, a distress call, not to their own people, but to anyone who would listen. They weren't calling for reinforcements. They were begging for evacuation. The once mighty conquerors of worlds were asking to be rescued from a species they had considered insignificant. And when the order to retreat finally came, it was not given with dignity. It was screamed in desperation. A full withdrawal. Abandon all ground forces. Cut losses. Flee. The warships in orbit didn't wait. The moment the retreat was authorized, they began their ascent, leaving entire battalions stranded below. Those who remained realized too late that they had been sacrificed. The snipers did not spare them. They hunted them down to the last soldier. When the last shot was fired, Earth was silent. The cities still bore the scars of invasion, but they stood. The war was over. Humanity had not just survived, it had won. And it had done so without matching the enemy in firepower or numbers. It had won through patience, through strategy, through something no alien empire could ever replicate. Word of the defeat spread across the galaxy. The Akyros, once feared, were now a warning. The species they had mocked had broken them. Future war councils spoke of humanity not with derision, but with caution. Because the truth had been made clear. Earth was not to be invaded. Humanity was not to be provoked. And if war ever came again, the galaxy knew one thing above all else. No army, no matter how advanced, could survive against the silent death that waited in the shadows.